what's up, guys? It's Aux Fiends. Today, I'm here with Rishabh, my co-host. I'm Mateo, and this week we are reviewing my choice. I know I previewed that a little bit last week, but now we're actually going deep diving into Chuck Pearson's Eccojams Volume 1. And so, I don't even know where to start with this other than I just have a bunch of information about this specific album. So I know I said it's Chuck Pearson's, right? It's album. That's actually a one-time pseudonym used by One O Tricks Point Never, which again is just another stage name, whose real name is Daniel Lopaton. And he released Eccojams around 2010. I think it was August 8th. And this, I actually need to clarify some things, because last podcast I said this wasn't the first Vaporwave album. I was actually wrong. I was confusing it with another. This actually was the first Vaporwave album. At first, it had come out as kind of a jokish album and whatnot, and that's what One O Tricks has stated later on. And for Eccojams, the genres kind of include, obviously, it's a Vaporwave album. There's plunderphonics, chopped and screwed genres in this, and for these tracks, I think I should clarify one thing, just because Rishabh and I just watched this off of YouTube, and on YouTube, the creator was Vapor God, I think he was called, and in his description, he uses the track list by whatever, I think the guy's called, and I even double checked the track list, because there's a bunch of different random track lists around on the internet for this album, because there's not any specific set, like 100% one. As far as at least I'm aware, there isn't one, and so I kind of just use mix of that and the Wikipedia, because all the tracks don't really have names other than just fan names. It's just kind of A1, A2, and then it goes.
That was really stressful for taking notes, by the way, Mateo. That was just hard.
Yeah.
Gotta keep track of some timestamps.
Yeah, that actually, we'll get into that later when we get into the track, but some I had to like make sure what minute and second I was on, because some of them have zero transitions or anything. It just kind of goes into them.
Yep.
Anyways, I think that's most everything I have to say, just to preface kind of this album, and just so all the audience is aware, that's how we're going to be going by. We'll let you know, so for when we get to each track and whatnot, and what song we're on. But I do want to say kind of why I picked this album. Like, for me, I'm a huge Vaporwave fan. I've been into it for a couple years now. Though this wasn't my first album I'd ever listened to, I've definitely loved some tracks off this album. For me, I just believe it's a great start and intro, especially those to new to Vaporwave, because I mean, there's a ton of different offshoots of Vaporwave now, and I think it's just one of the easiest and kind of clean ways just to get pure Vaporwave. It's just by listening to this album. And especially, because I know this wasn't your first ever Vaporwave experience, was it, Rishabh?
No, it wasn't.
No? Yeah. So I thought that too. But I'm really interested in your thoughts overall, just like for Vaporwave, because I don't think you've ever listened to this much, especially because a lot of people say Vaporwave's dead, or it's just a joke genre. Even though this album did come out originally kind of as a joke, I think it's definitely stemmed a ton just from that.
Sure, yeah.
Like, believe me, I believe Vaporwave, just as a whole, and its aesthetic and everything, has way more substance to it than just, it's, no one listened to this, just kind of a joke, whatever, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of wraps up my pre-thoughts to this album, and kind of why I picked it. I mean, when I had told you about this album, that I was picking it for this episode, did you have any, like, thoughts about it? Have you ever? I don't think you've ever heard of it or anything. I mean,
definitely
what
not,
did you think? Yeah.
Yeah, I'd never heard of it. So it was pretty much, I was kind of going off of your this is Vaporwave, and it's pretty much sort of the early beginning stages of, or like you said, it was influential, I think, more than that. Anything else. So
definitely.
That was pretty much what I was going in for. Other than that, I was pretty much blind. I didn't realize how much effort I'd have to put into the timestamps, so that was fun.
Yeah.
And taking notes and making sure I'm at the exact timestamp that I need to be at. But otherwise, like, in terms of expectations, I mean, I knew it was influential for Vaporwave, and that's pretty much it.
Okay. Yeah. And one thing we're gonna be deviating a little different than kind of taking turns for each track. I'll probably just be starting each track, at least just because I had actually found and written down every single sample used in each song, because it is vaporwave, especially for the first album. That's all they use is just samples and chopping and screwing the different kind of samples and slowing them down and whatnot. And if you guys kind of want to follow along as well, I got them from the Vaporwave wiki, so you just search up Chuck Person's Eccojams Volume 1, and you'll be able to see the entire track list with all the different samples and used by that. So I think it's better late than never just to start up with the first track, A1.
Let's do it.
The sample used was Africa by Toto. Like, for me, it's good. It's great. It's a classic vaporwave song. I feel like, especially if you're in the know of vaporwave, you definitely have heard this before. And like I was saying, it's just kind of the founding father of vaporwave. You can really just see it with this track, just because there's just something perfect about how it sampled a classic kind of 80s song and just kind of formed the entire genre, just starting off right here. And you can see that in literally every single vaporwave album from now on. It was just 80s and just all kinds of rhythm with that, and I think it was just one of the perfect intros for vaporwave overall. Definitely a good song, I'd say. How do you feel about it?
Hey everyone, so let's talk about this album. Mateo has given quite the intro for it, and I was holding off my opinions, Mateo, because I wanted us to get into the tracks.
Yeah.
And let's talk about the album as a whole already. Look, I'm gonna.
You want to skip over the first track?
No. Hold on. We're gonna talk about track A1 too, but I feel like, okay, here's my thing: is that my track reviews very much feed into my opinion of the whole album.
Okay.
So I just have a couple of things I want to talk about in terms of vaporwave, and
yeah,
like you only asked me about expectations, so I just talked about what I thought before. Now that I've listened to the album, okay. So for me, vaporwave is like something I associate a lot with lo-fi. I mean, is that wrong, Mateo? Those are pretty related genres, would you say?
They're definitely different genres and whatnot, but I'd even say like the lo-fi was there before, but I think it kind of stemmed with and kind of grew with vaporwave as well. But they're definitely different. But I understand how you're
like the parallels, right? Okay.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of parallels. Yeah.
Okay, so here's the thing: is that from what I've listened to and what I think I've listened to as vaporwave, I've enjoyed a lot for sure. This album was not at that level for me. Let's just say that. I'm gonna be just really real here, Mateo, and with all the listeners here. Like, all the track reviews that I have are very negative. So, spoiler alert.
Okay.
But I'm still gonna talk about some of the specifics. Okay.
Okay.
So, and I'll start by talking about A1 here. I mean, it's not good. I didn't like it. And the whole thing of repetition, right? And so this is why I kind of feel like all the tracks kind of lead into like a genre / album discussion, is that like the entire album, like you said, correct me if I'm wrong with the terminology, but like the screwing effects, or what was the exact thing you called it?
What did I call it? It was chopped and screw. I mean, that's just a genre.
Yeah, the chopped and screw like effects. Yeah. I wrote down my notes. A couple of these tracks is like a scanner effect too, where like the music changes a bunch. Look, 100% A+ for novelty, creativity, and experimentation. Mm-hmm. I'm going to give you that throughout the album. It's new, it's different. I have never necessarily listened to something like this before. Mm-hmm. But to me, this entire album, including track A1, and with a lot of the other tracks, to varying degrees for sure, and we'll talk about that, it's basically like a cool experimental album that's cool for experimentation, but I would not listen to it. I feel like this is a stepping stone to something in the future, like perhaps what vaporwave is now, or what I believe it to be now. So it's definitely, I recognize how it's influential and serves as a basis. But other than that, I think musically, like if I were to critique this and see how much value it has, for me, it's pretty dull. Not a lot here. And it's just, in some places, quite unlistenable for me. I'm just going to say that too.
Wow. Okay.
Look, and the comparison I'm going to give is, and Mateo, you know me, that I would give a comparison like this, is that like if you watch like really early cinema, like just like the very basic early films.
Okay.
You definitely might not love it in terms of entertainment value or perhaps even like a cinematic value, but you'll appreciate what it did for the future of cinema. So it's the same with this album, like throughout, to be honest, is that I can see the little glimpses of what I believe to be a totally different genre now, and some of the offshoots of the genre as well. But as an album, it's just like an experiment, nothing more than that. And I think it's sort of interesting that Chuck Person or whatever his real name is.
You just One Tricks Point Never. You just call him that. That's what he goes by now.
One Tricks Point Never.
Yeah.
You can, like, he called it a joke or whatever. That was sort of interesting to me. And I wouldn't say that, I'm not going to be one of those people and say, like, this isn't music and then, berate it in that sense. It's certainly not traditional. It's experimental. But it's, again, coming down to that same comparison I made with early films, that I appreciate it. I can understand why it's influential, but I would not listen to it over and over again. And I found it to be very dull. And I'll talk about the specific tracks as we go. But for A1 specifically, again, I didn't have a lot of notes in this one since I was just warming up to the sound of this album.
Yeah.
So I definitely have more notes going in, and some of them are just me logging my thoughts. And I'll read some of those out as we go. But for this one, did not work for me. A lot of repetition. Not what I like.
The sample or anything like
the
that?
The sample's all right. I mean, I didn't recognize it as Africa for some reason. Now that you say it, it definitely, I guess, sort of rings a bell. It's been a while since I listened to Africa. I don't know. But I don't know. I just couldn't recognize it at the time. But it was, look, I'm going to be honest, it's not the worst track on here. It's probably one of the better ones. At least it's a little bit more tuneful and but still not great. Definitely not a fan. I'll say that.
Wow. Okay. I mean,
I hope you're ready for this podcast, everyone, because
I'm going to say, ladies and gentlemen, this is why we're called Aux Fiends. That seems we're on different. We're not even different sides of the world. We're on different stratospheres right now. And, I will say this. I do absolutely respect your opinion, and it is actually part of why I picked this album, just as a whole, because I really wanted you to see Vaporwave's beginning, because I know that you do like some of the newer stuff, and I think that's. Yeah. Again, why I picked this, just because this is one of the most purest forms of just vaporwave you can find.
Sure, yeah.
Just because there's a ton of, offshoots and whatnot and stuff people call vaporwave in quotations, but honestly, it really isn't.
Yeah, I totally agree there, for sure. The thing where you're saying it's like the basis, but yeah.
Yeah. I definitely say it's the foundation. I can respect that you do like the newer stuff other than the older stuff. I mean, I completely agree where you said this is more experimental, and I think that is what it is, It is not for everyone. I'll definitely dive deeper into that when I do my full album review, but
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I said, 100% full marks for originality and novelty, and it's experimental, and I give it full credit for that. I also give it full credit for understanding how influential it is. And the weird thing is that I like music that's different and sort of has that soundscape quality, but this album didn't work for me, and I'll go into the tracks as we go down. So let's move on to A2 if you're ready.
A2. So for this sample, it was Only Over You by Fleetwood Mac. For me, A2, very hypnotic. You can start to see where it gets very, very choppy and screwy, kind of around the mid mark of this song. I do want to say for A1 and A2 both, I'd say, are definitely more of the popular songs on the album on Eccojams.
I'm not surprised, but yeah.
Yeah, it was definitely these two. I'm not sure if it's just because it's the first couple songs on the album, or maybe they are the best. I did mark them off that they're not my favorites. We'll get to my favorite later, but I definitely liked these first couple ones, and that's all I got to say about A2.
All right, so for me, I think this one's okay. Again, my issues with all the tracks are pretty much altogether the same. Mm-hmm. Not a fan of how the effects are used. It feels random to me, and that's where I get the sort of experimental vibe, where it's just experimentation and good as that only, because we talk about something like Daft Punk's Discovery, right?
Yeah.
And there's repetition in that, so I'm not against repetitive music per se. It's just it needs to create something for me, and for me, this album never really does that. It feels like the artist here is just kind of playing around with different things and trying to see what sticks. I mean, I never feel like I'm listening to a fully formed track, in my opinion. I just feel like it doesn't sound like it doesn't sound fully formed to me. It sounds like a scratch product or something that's in the making of becoming something. Like he's just messing with the things. And I understand the appeal of this album is that feeling. So I get it. It's just throughout it, that's sort of the feeling I got. Again, for A2, I like that sort of radio scanner reverb effect that's used in here a little bit. It's a little bit more creative than some of the stuff in A1, I guess. So I liked it a little bit, in that sense. But again, similar issues with A1 to A2. But I'll still say I can understand why these two are the most popular, like you said.
Yeah.
He samples pretty popular tracks in these two, or popular artists at least. And so I can understand why someone might like it for that reason too. So, not a fan of A2 either, Mateo. not a big fan at least.
All right. I mean, now I'm interested to when I finally do hear your favorite track, and and I guess least favorite too. I don't know, but
it wasn't easy. I'll say that. But
all right. And before we'll jump into A3, I do want to say this, like for A2 and a different songs on Eccojams, I do have not a bunch to say. Not to say obviously I'm opposite sides of Rishabh. I do like this album, but there are some where it kind of is just like, oh, okay, I don't have a bunch to say about this, but others I have paragraphs and stuff like that, to talk about. So I just wanted to preface that too before we go too on. So this one is like when someone's listening, like, oh, you guys both didn't say anything, It's weird. This is because there are a ton of tracks on this album. It's a beefy album. It clocks in at 55 minutes.
55 minutes, yeah.
Then. Yeah. Anyways, and we're back. A3. We had a little mix-up. It's alright. But A3, the samples are Too Little Too Late by JoJo and Castle in the Sky by Ian Van Dahl. For me, this is the repetition I kind of love. And it's another classic. I mean, A3, I'd definitely say, because the album's kind of split up into two halves, side A, side B. This is definitely kind of the golden parts, I'd say, of the album.
Okay.
Well, coming from
I just
someone
had
who
to put in that reaction there because. All right, continue.
Okay, this is coming from someone who does like this album. I'd say these are definitely the more popular songs and overall. But here with A3, you can kind of see where One Tricks Point Never kind of has the two different samples. Sometimes he has three later on and whatnot, and he kind of splits it up in a weird way. And I'm not sure if that's a track listing or whatnot, or if it's just the actual song how that was meant to be. So I'm sure other listeners have kind of curated it to maybe being different parts, just because there are the two samples, and definitely in Eccojams just overall, you can kind of see when when it's each sample's going on, or at least I do because I have the sample listing, but it's that's definitely kind of when it either changes in parts of the specific song or just changes this track entirely. You can definitely see this starting here, and he has the track record of doing it. To me, I definitely liked the first part, the Too Little Too Late sample, more than the second, and overall, but with the second one, to me, it kind of sounds like an underwater journey, if you know what I mean. Do you get that?
I mean, a little bit.
Yeah. It's kind of funny, too, because especially a big part of Vaporwave kind of aesthetic, especially later on, is just kind of those late night drives home, you're on a journey, you know what I mean? Especially with the music videos and stuff, and Simpsons Wave and whatnot. You definitely kind of, I think it's really interesting though I didn't like that song as much, but you kind of see the beginning parts of that kind of forming with just kind of the hypnotic almost journey with it, especially in the second part of this,
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you got to say about A3?
So for this one, I agree with you about again, the whole album is laying foundation for things. So for this one reminded me of the slow plus reverb videos, because it was slowed down and reverbed.
Yeah.
So definitely that. The beginning is like a pop tune sample, muffled, so I get where you're getting the underwater
Hmm.
journey vibe from because it has the vocals muffled there. And then of course there's a transition, and then there's like the echoed version. I thought it was the same song, but you're saying it's a different sample, which makes sense.
Yeah.
Kind of gets a little bit more reflective with an echo, for sure. So I like the little transition from a very like pop tune to a more like reflective mood. So I like that part of the track. Still not a fan of the sound here, but A3 is alright. I mean, I can
Okay.
maybe listen to this one more, a little bit maybe. But still, yeah, pretty harsh on this album, everyone. Just not my thing. And the weird thing is that again, it's like it's soundscape music, so I know a lot of it has to do with just like that sort of like feeling or whatever. But again, I just doesn't click with me the sound and how it works and the way that there's effects and repetition. It feels randomized. And A3, I'll give it the transition though. That was pretty neat. That was cool. And I could potentially listen again, like throughout the album, I could listen to some of these tracks like sort of in the background or under the right circumstances or setting. If I was, again, like you were saying, driving back somewhere late at night,
Yeah.
it has like a hypnotic quality to it. So maybe in that scenario, but otherwise, yeah, A3 isn't that great either. But at least transition's cool, and I kind of like the ending. So
Okay.
that's about it.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Okay. So now on to A4. The sample is Morphine by Michael Jackson. I'm actually gonna lead into you first. What are your thoughts on A4 first?
So for me, this one felt like an early interlude, and we always talk about interludes on this
Yeah.
podcast now, I think, because it's just there's just some tracks that are filler, and this one is one of them. It's probably easily one of the worst and shortest tracks on here.
Hmm.
Not a lot to say from me, I'll be honest. What did you think?
So is it your least favorite or no?
No.
Okay, because I'll say this. This is A4 is my least favorite. I gotta say.
Okay. Yeah, I
I
mean, it's
mean,
short, so.
yeah, it's so short. There's like major distortions. Usually I'm pretty cool with the distortion, but it's like I felt almost like I kind of barely heard the sample.
Hmm.
It might have been a little too spacey, kind of distorted for my taste, if I'm being honest.
Yeah.
Just what I was thinking when I was listening to this, because I actually had to listen to this two and a half times just because it's so short and there's almost like no transition into the next song. We'll get into that with the next one, but like I was like, wait, when does the song end? I wasn't even sure, and like it didn't even make sense to me. And it's just like I feel I have to be in a very very specific mood for this. Like again, too short for my tastes. That's all I gotta say about A4.
Yeah, not a lot there.
Yeah. Okay.
Moving on to the next track here.
Yeah, A5. The sample is "Everybody's Been Burned by the Birds." I even should have wrote honestly that it had the same exact sample. At least you heard that right? There was such a lack of transition that it was a transition because it was just the same song
Yeah,
continued.
I wrote A4 continues here. I mean, I'm pretty
Yeah.
sure, again, I think the whole album isn't really, I'm glad that we listened to it and we did this episode, but I think the whole album doesn't lend itself a whole lot to a lot of track breakdown,
Yeah.
maybe, or it's like not easy to do a track breakdown because it's all kind of just one soundscape
Yeah.
throughout. Like it's 150. It's almost like a one long 55-minute track in some ways, but we can talk about portions of it. Yeah. So A4 continues in A5. I agree with you there.
Yeah. I think you said it perfectly. I mean, maybe the best almost way to kind of break it down, other than what we got, would just be the samples. Because I definitely know I can always notice when it kind of just changes song just by the sample. But again, some of these samples just merge into another. So maybe it would be better even just to have them each song specific track should just be by the sample. But back to A5. You already know my thoughts on A4, so that first half I didn't really like. But when the song kind of changed and it kind of got back to a good rhythm with the sample song, I thought that was good. I thought it was a good sample. But again, I gotta knock some points off for it though, just because that transition or maybe lack of thereof, I don't even know what to call it, you know.
Mm-hmm.
That was kind of it. That's all I got to say about this one for A5. You know,
Yeah.
it kind of just burned me. I mean, it's kind of funny, ironic, because the sample is everybody's been burned. It kind of burned me, literally, just by having the A4 continuation with it. What are your thoughts?
Sure. I mean, you could knock it for having A4 in it, but it's not like it being there or not being there makes this any better. Let's be real. More terrifying staticky noise. This is the part where I want to start reading off like what I was thinking, and then I wrote it down. So I wrote down terrifying staticky noise. And hey, look, staticky noise can be used well, and I just don't think these tracks do it well at all. It feels, and this is like the first track where I feel like there's like a lot of harsh dissonance throughout every track.
Yeah.
It's just like, it's not tuneful. It sounds like mechanic. Like I feel like I'm in a loud factory. And again, I understand that's sort of the appeal of it to some people. I don't find that super appealing. I think dissonance can be used well. I think this is just like, it's just pure dissonance, and it just doesn't sound great to me. I'm surprised that, you like this one as much as you do, or you like it somewhat, I guess. And
I like it somewhat, like it.
Yeah. I wrote down the vocals are hypnotic, which they kind of almost always are because it's sampled. It's definitely played around with. And it's like, I just wrote down hypnotic vocals and dissonant flurry of sound. So it's, more dissonant soundscapes coming in, more dissonant than before for sure. I think A1 through A3 are a little bit, it's more poppy, safe to say. Mm-hmm. Here's where we start getting into weirder territory. So good in that sense. It's weird. It's cool to be different in that sense. But not an interesting or enjoyable listening experience to me. And we talk about songs sometimes that are not necessarily, they're not pop, they're not enjoyable. It's not like it's very melodic, but you still enjoy them because they're interesting or engaging or make you think in some way. For me, this just kind of grates on my nerves throughout the whole album. Just, I wanted it to end, and there's no other way to put this. I did not. Like A5 is like, it's the beginning of the end of this album.
Wow.
I used to already be like I don't want this anymore, but anyway, okay. That's my rant on A5. But we're gonna get to worse tracks, so this is still not my worst.
Okay.
Yep, let's continue.
Okay, so A6 sample is Lonely by Janet Jackson. All I gotta say is, Face It, or was it Feel It? One of those, I don't even remember now, but it was like, it was definitely Feel It. Like, because it just kept repeating that. Overall, I liked it, but then when it just kind of got super, super choppy with just the Feel It line, I was like, okay, I'm over that. And it kind of hurts me a little bit just because I actually really liked everything else. Like, I'd even say I almost loved the track, other than when it got almost too playful with the chopping of Feel It, Because I thought there was a bunch of creativity in this song. It almost felt like I was going different mindscapes when I'm listening to some songs, and it felt like I was almost like training and meditating, like in like the mountains. It was like a montage of doing that, almost like the Karate Kid or something. I don't even see,
Yeah, I have a good point to make about that. I know where you're coming from because I feel like this is a lighter mix, and so to me it gave me an 80s vibe. I wrote down Starcourt Mall from Stranger Things because it reminded me of like 80s mall music, or what I had imagined 80s mall music to be. But I totally agree with you. Still too many repeat effects in some places. It's a little better than A5. It's not like super dissonant. It's more similar to like, I guess, an A2 or an A3 type of track. And it feels a little bit more lighthearted, but again, same issues as usual. So experimentation's cool, but this is not something that I'm enjoying listening to or finding it particularly engaging in any way. But yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yep. I'm very negative on this album. A funny thing is, well, my pick last week, and I'm sure listeners who listened to that episode know, was Melodrama by Lorde, and I was ready for Mateo to be super harsh on it. And Mateo was not as harsh on that as I am toward this, so that's sort of interesting.
Give me some, sugar with that salt, dude. Like,
we'll get to my favorite track. What are we talking about that one? I'm interested. Yeah, I think A1 through A3 were sort of contenders. Maybe it would change later on, but I
Okay.
do have one that I was a little bit more definite on. So yeah.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. So for A7, the sample was The Four Horsemen by Aphrodite's Child. This is one of those I don't have a ton to say about for A7. To me, this was definitely like the biggest sample song change. I don't know if you remember that. It didn't feel like kind of I don't know when that song came out. It didn't feel like the kind of the poppy 80s though. I did think it worked pretty well, the sample in overall, just with the vaporwave genre, especially just how One of Tricks kind of changed it around and slowed it down a little bit. But it was kind of a little bit of middle of the ground song for me. Yeah.
Mhm.
Now, what about you?
So this is my least favorite track on the album.
Yeah?
Yeah, because look, I think vaporwave lends itself very well to perhaps something like pop or trance
Hmm.
music, or even, to be honest, it can even lend itself to some of that harsh dissonant noise, which I hate, but at least it sounds like it could work within that form. This to me is a metal song, so it doesn't fit within the genre, and playing around with it ruins the perfectly good sample that's at its center. I don't think the artist here knew what to do with a metal tune. Hey, again, full points for trying. I mean, most vaporwave I listen to now even is usually not playing around with metal samples. So definitely cool that he gave it a shot, but it did not come out right. And to me, there are songs that I perhaps maybe even hate more than this one, but for me this is the worst because it's not using the metal track correctly, if that makes sense. I feel like
Okay.
it just does not mesh for me at all. So this is my least favorite.
Okay. A little harsh. Makes sense though. I even while we were talking, I looked it up. There's a rock song from like the 70s.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's definitely. We both saw it. It was just the biggest sample change I'd say in
exactly.
this entire album. You
Exactly,
know.
exactly.
Yeah. All right. So now we got A8.
Mhm.
Samples are "My Love Is Waiting" by Marvin Gaye, and then the other sample is "Hearsay" by Alexander O'Neill. This is another one of those that are kind of the two-parters. You know what I mean? With just in one song. For the first part, I actually really liked the swapping in and out between of the sample, and then like I just felt it kind of slowed down when it needed to, but then it kind of swapped back and it had a good pace to it. I even back to kind of my mindscape that I felt when I heard at least the first part. It almost felt like if you combined a tortoise and a hare and fused it into just one animal. You know what I mean? It's because sometimes it's super slow, but then it like picks up really really quick, and then it goes back down. And
Mateo, I'm going to be honest here. You just
yeah,
totally lost me on this train of thought you have, but you can continue.
it's just a not a
I know what
slow or
you're.
a fast animal. You know
I
what I
know,
mean?
I know what you mean, and it's not necessarily the train of thought that you had by itself. It's more how it fits in within this track or within this album, because I'm just lost on this album. But
Okay.
go ahead,
Well,
go
yeah,
ahead.
it seems like you're definitely lost, but no, I just thought the actual tempo of the song, they're more
Okay.
musical
Yeah,
terms.
yeah, yeah. Sure.
It slowed down and then turned up when it needed to, But it wasn't ever just like in the middle. It was just either one or the other, and I kind of like that. For the second part, to me, it seemed a little bit lazy. I don't know if you felt that, but it was a good song, but not enough. I felt was changed. Like it didn't feel like vaporwavy. I
Hmm.
guess like I like the song, but it just they didn't do enough for me, And especially I did not need that white noise at the end. I don't even know how long that was.
Yeah.
It gets the song gets creative as a whole, but I'm just kind of like, come on, I don't know.
Yeah.
I didn't care for the white noise at the end too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds like you're not that positive on this album almost, I feel.
Really?
Oh yeah, I mean you are positive on certain parts of it, and I think other
Hmm.
parts me and you really strongly agree. Because I'll say, yeah, I think in the beginning this had some more typical, like what I would say, maybe apparently what I thought in my notes at least is like more typical to what current vaporwave might sound like, some techno vibes,
Yeah.
repetition, scanners, slowdown, all that stuff. Those effects were used I guess, pretty nicely, and then it's just like dissonance, noise, the ending, again, grating on my nerves. Why, And it's like, for me, a lot of these tracks, and I think that it's cool what they're trying to do in vaporwave in general, but I think a lot of this album, not to sound super like against experimental music, but I felt like it ruined some perfectly good sample tracks, and they could have experimented better around it. You know what I mean? Like I just feel like I've heard vaporwave tracks and I've heard similar soundscape tracks that know how to use their samples well, and this is not it. This is just like, hey, let's just keep playing around and see what sticks. That's pretty much what I kind of feel with a lot of this album, is that there's not a lot of clarity about where, in terms of musical composition you want to do things. But I actually have a sort of parallel I'll get into too towards the toward my album review, to another thing that kind of lines up with this album, and I can kind of understand it from that lens. But yeah, that's pretty much my thing on A8.
All right. You said a lot of stuff. I feel like I got to break down a little bit before we go into the next track.
Let's
just saying,
down.
like, just with you saying that I'm more. I think it's interesting you say that I'm more critical than you maybe thought, or it seems like I don't like this album, because I definitely do like this album. I mean, obviously way more than you, but at least with these with the podcast and with all different album reviews, at least so far, I do try to be not too subjective with it too, and I do try to overall just kind of be critical but not too critical. And I don't want to just say, oh, I just love the song, like overall there's just so many tracks, so it'd be hard to just base off just a few songs that, like, I don't love to face how I feel about the album as a whole.
Yeah, I think what I meant is more that, like, there's like certain parts of the tracks too that I think we agree on really heavily. Like you mentioned the white noise thing, and I mentioned in my notes like the dissonance and noise. So I think we agree that certain elements of the tracks don't work. That's pretty much what I was kind of talking about. Okay. Is that, like, in that sense, we agree more than we perhaps were in the beginning or something like that. But yeah.
Okay, that's fair. And that kind of wraps us to the end of side A, and now we're into side B, the second side. Starting off with B1. The sample is "Don't Give Up" by Peter Gabriel and Kate Bush. And there's another sample too, "Sweet Little Mystery" by John Martin. I kind of compared this track with A1 because they're both the starting songs of each side. To me, I didn't think this was as strong as A1. Overall, I kind of felt like ethereal jazz. I don't know if you got that.
I wrote down similar to A3, actually. At least at the time when I was listening, I felt that it was similar. I think there's some synth and, like, sort of more regular, like, you can hear the vocals a little bit better in this track too. So I noticed that too. But my first note on this one, much like many of these tracks, is dissonant, noisy soundscapes return. So there we go.
Okay. Is that for both of the parts or just
for B1? For B1. But
I mean, because this is another one that you can kind of break up a little bit, like the half of the song, because I had only talked about the first part of this song.
Mateo, I'm going to be really honest. From B1 out, I was pretty jaded by this album, so.
Whoa. Okay.
I'm just going to say that I think by B2 and B3, till now my notes have been very, like, lowercase, but I'm seeing a little bit more punctuation marks here, a little bit more uppercase lettering, so. Whoa. Things get pretty intense moving on.
Have we even gotten to your favorite track yet, though?
We definitely have not, but...
Okay. But I guess to wrap up B1...
all terrible, so...
wrap it up, for what my thoughts on the part 2 kind of ish of the song is, I'm starting to notice a trend where, at least, again, the track listing we have, the second part is definitely kind of weaker overall on these tracks.
Maybe.
Yeah, I can kind of notice the trend. I mean, we've seen it before, and we'll see it later on, too, especially when it's double sampled in these songs. But anything else to say about B1?
Nope. I'm pretty good for B1.
Okay. Leads us into B2. Samples are Gypsy by Fleetwood Mac and Love TKO. This is performed by
A lot of
Teddy
Fleetwood Mac.
Pendergrass.
I'm just noticing that right now, but a
Yeah.
lot of Fleetwood Mac. A lot of 70s, to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah, that's actually kind of funny. 'Cause when you think about vaporwave, you're like, oh yeah, 80s samples, 80s aesthetic,
Exactly.
everything. But it's like,
Yep.
oh wait, for the founding album, a lot of
70s.
70s, a lot of 70s actually.
A lot
Yeah.
of 70s, yeah.
I thought this song was, I don't know if that's the right words, but I thought it was hilarious at
Terrible.
first.
How about it was terrible?
Okay,
I mean,
let me finish up.
tell me why it's hilarious.
I get it. I didn't think this was like a super. This is not one I'd totally go back to, but it felt almost like I was like an entry level like NPC or like enemy in like a video game, and I was just like I was just like getting completely pummeled by like the main character of the story or the game or the player. You know what I mean? That's why I just thought it was just so funny. I don't know. Like this is definitely not one of the better tracks, at least for the first part. But that's just why I thought it was so hilarious. And then I know I just got done saying there was a trend of the second part of these kind of songs kind of being weaker, but actually I thought this second part with the Love TKO sample was way better. I was
Yeah,
like, well,
yeah.
this is a switcheroo, you know.
Sure,
You know,
yeah.
this was I got back into the kind of the classic vaporwave groove. I love the choppiness.
Yes. Yeah.
I liked the voice the kid. I don't know if you heard the kid. I don't know if the kid is like on the song or not, but
It might just be
know-
like it might be a high pitched vocal. I mean, I'm not sure, but
okay, maybe it sounded like a kid, or maybe that was just another like they just took a sample from like a movie or something when it was saying the same words. Because I loved it when that voice was intertwined with the actual sample of the song as well, and like overall, definitely second part was way better for me.
yeah, I'd agree with that. This is another one, guys, where I'm just gonna read off my notes so you feel the journey that I had with this song and some of the hatred I had especially in the first half, where I wrote dissonant build up to, and then it's all in caps lock, dissonant noise repetition, and then I wrote in caps lock dissonant static, and then I wrote down sarcastically, can we please have more static? And then ironically or unironically, right after I write that, I wrote down in caps lock airplane noises. So pretty much up to this point, I'm not having a great time. You know, I've mentioned a million times, cool experimentation, not a great sound. And then I write, okay, now we got a transition, and this sounds much better than dissonant static. And then voice chopping was kind of a cool effect. So overall, second half was like, I wouldn't even say I liked it, but it was a relief from the first half. So in that sense, it's quote unquote good. But overall, this is probably one of the worst tracks on the album. I mean, apart from the metal one, I'd say this is probably second. The metal one really for me is it's about you ruined a perfectly good sample. Here it's just terrible to begin with. So I mean, there's nothing to rescue. Yeah, why is there a whole part where there's just a bunch of white noise is beyond me. It's an interesting choice for sure. It doesn't go well with the track. It felt terrible. I mean, it sounds like I said, I feel like I'm in a machine or a factory and I'm having to sit down here and listen to machine and factory noises because I have this podcast. But at this point, B2, I was really done. I mean, I know we still have a lot to go through.
Oh my god.
I was really close to being done. I mean, I was really getting just not liking this album at B2 at all. It's worse. Honestly, I almost want to switch my worst to B2. I'm not going to do that because to me somehow messing with a metal song still feels like a bigger issue to me. But B2 is bad. B2 is really bad. Do not listen to B2.
No, definitely listen to B2. At least like the second half of it.
Yeah,
definitely listen to B2.
The second half is better if you listen to the first half because at least you've gone through the pain of the first half, and then the second half is like, okay, I'm done listening to machine factory noises. I can listen to something.
That bad. What's wrong with being in a machine factory and like listening to the noises? I would do that.
That's what I'm saying, man. Is that there's been times where I enjoy soundscapey noises. I like atmospheric music. This is not one of those times. This sounds absolutely terrible. I mean, it really grates on your nerves. That's the only way I can really describe it. Is where look, as I said earlier, I'm not going to be one of those people who says this isn't music or whatever, because I get it. It's untraditional. It's definitely different from traditional music, but it's still music by definition, you know. But for me, no. I mean, this is just, it sounds terrible. It just hurts my brain, and I...
Hearing all this hurts my brain.
I know.
I need to go. I'm done with B2 now. I don't want to hear any more of this blasphemy.
The funny thing is, I'm trying to not even be too harsh. I'm actually just B2 was terrible. Let's never revisit this.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, B3. Let's get away from that. Samples are Baker Street by Gary Rafferty, and another sample is Separate Lives by Phil Collins and Marilyn Martin. For the first kind of part again, I like the drums in the back, good rhythm. It kind of felt like I was another Mindscape. Felt like I was kind of sneaking into a castle almost. I don't know if you've ever seen Castle of Cagliostro, one of Hayao Miyazaki's one of his first movies, but it kind of reminded me of his soundtrack with his first part. Yeah,
get the visuals, but yeah.
And then the second part, I don't even call that. I was just like, I wrote down. I'm just reading off what I wrote. Alvin and the Chipmunks? Question mark.
I wrote that down.
Yeah. You know what I mean?
That's crazy. I wrote down literally Alvin and the Chipmunks. I wrote down high-pitched vocals are here. Sorry if I screamed too much into the mic there, but I wrote down Alvin and the Chipmunks.
Yeah, like, it was just, like, very jarring, as most, like, samples in Vaporwave is not high-pitched at all. It was completely the opposite. Like, I was not prepared for this at all.
Yep.
Like, this was pitched up way more than I'm used to, like...
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I kind of like the screwiness with the song in between the kind of, I just called them, quote, chipmunk tunes.
Yep.
You know?
I wrote down Alvin and the Chipmunks, so I agree there.
Yeah, I don't know. That was just kind of funny. It's just like,
yeah.
I didn't know we're sampling Alvin and the Chipmunks now, you know, but those are my thoughts on B3.
Yeah, I said nice vibe in the beginning. I don't remember the exact details of it right now. I mean, I listened to this album yesterday, so it's a little fuzzy, but just going off my notes, there was cool, good repetition in the beginning, but I guess I still thought it was too much, which is pretty much always there. And at one point, my third note was maybe this is the best track of the album. But then after that, immediately I wrote, I spoke too soon, more dissonance is back, which led to Alvin and the Chipmunks tunes, or whatever you called it, chipmunk tunes.
Just Chipmunks tunes. I don't know.
Chipmunk tune time, and then I was like, man, okay, one of the better tracks maybe, but I mean, in general, like, I don't even know how much I can review the tracks, partially because it's been a little bit of a while since I've listened to the entire album, but also because I just want to forget this album. I did not have a good time.
Gosh.
B3 is probably, honestly, if I were to go back and listen, based on what I've written here, knowing myself and knowing what I've written here, I'd probably be okay with it, but it's not great. It's not good, but it just is. I mean, it's not great. Did not like it. Moving on.
Okay. Moving on. B4. Sample is The Lady in Red by Chris de Burgh. I'm just going to come out and say it. This is my favorite track.
Mm-hmm. I like this one a little bit more.
My favorite track. This is definitely high contenders with like the first A1 through A3 because I really like those as well. But this, I don't know. Sure. It's just a classic vaporwave song for me. I wrote there's great sounds, great rhythm. It was a great sample. It was just great all around. I didn't feel it was too out there, too experimental, but I also thought it was still creative. I just thought it was good.
Mm-hmm.
That's my favorite. This is one I could just pop in and listen to. I don't have to be in a specific mood just to listen to this song.
Yeah, I sort of agree with you here. B4 is not that bad. I guess I like the beginning of this track, and then the sound kind of grew on me when I was listening to it. And overall, it was nice because it wasn't ruined by all those like hyper effects that this artist likes to do. But it's almost kind of interlude-ish, and it sort of seeps into B5 too when we talk about B5. But, you know, not that bad comparatively. Not my favorite, but not that bad. It's at least I can listen to it. The rest, I'm not so sure, but this one I can sort of listen to. So
okay.
That one's all right.
All right, listen to B5. Sample is Me Against the World by Tupac. I thought this was a super chill song. It was actually kind of a top contender for me. And it was weird because I guess I had never done a full album listen through of Eccojams, but I guess I just had never heard this one before. I skipped over it, but like I'm definitely will be coming back to the song and listen to it again. I think it had a great kind of mellow kind of melody, and it like mellows out, and it kind of, I don't know, it's just like a rad song, you know. Like, it kept enough of the sample, but it still had a good enough amount of change with it. Yeah, what'd you think?
This is my favorite track off the album. So I realized why now is because at the time I didn't realize this was a Tupac sample, and that would explain a lot because I really like Tupac, even though I'm not exhaustive with Tupac at all. There's really only a few tracks that I like of his, and perhaps for listen more of his music, I'd get into it more. But I like his music, and so that makes sense. I wrote down it had like a cool 90s R&B sample, but it totally makes sense if it were Tupac and me kind of enjoying it for that reason. Sounds a little bit more like what I would imagine contemporary vaporwave would sort of sound like. Obviously, this one had a little bit of B4, but when it got into its own sort of B5 jam, I definitely like this one. Definitely echoing your mellow sort of sentiments. I don't remember exactly, but I wrote down like a cool R&B-ish tune, so I'd imagine it was quite mellow at the time when I was listening. But yeah, best track off the album for me. Comparatively, I mean, again, if I wanted to listen to a Tupac track, though, I'd just listen to that rather than listen to whatever, version of this that they've tried to create with this. Right. I mean, it's again my favorite off the album, but mostly probably because of the sample rather than anything else. So that's my thing for B5.
All right, I do want to say before we go to B6, I definitely actually think this is probably one of the most underrated tracks off the album. I mean, because I had never heard it before.
Maybe.
Like, definitely it's always, people know about B4, they definitely know that. And, like, the first couple inside A, they always talk about those, like, people online and whatnot.
I think definitely if I were to not go with B5, I would say something from the early A tracks, just because it has a bit more of a pop tune that I can kind of gravitate towards. But B5, good for the sample. I like the sample here, so I think that's what it comes down to for me.
Okay. B6, the sample is These Dreams by Heart. To me, this was super slow. It felt almost like I was falling asleep. I'm not sure if it was just because I listened to the entire album all in one go. And I'll say it, maybe I was in a slump with all the repetitiveness and stuff like that.
There we go.
I'll say this. I don't know. I was kind of a little slog towards this song.
This one was so repetitive too. I mean, I don't know if you agree, but like also all the ones that are like 2 minutes, I feel are like just repetition, and it's like how long can you listen to that? I mean, talk about Daft Punk's Around the World, 7 minutes of pure repetition, and it still sounds fresh and great. And then I can't even get through 2 minutes of repetition from this album. So
That's apples and oranges. Daft Punk is for the mainstream audience.
Is it really though?
Eccojams is for vaporwave is and always will be just a small little online niche. Like that's what it is. It's not for mainstream. Like I get what you're saying, but
like just music, like in the form of like just musical form, That's my thing. Is that like this
maybe for
artist
this song,
just doesn't know how to use repetition that well. That's it. That's pretty much it. Is that like there's just not enough musically interest. There's not enough in things happening that are musically interesting enough to make the repetition feel, I wouldn't say justified, but make it work, for me. And B6 is evidence of that, where it's so heavy on repetition. I think all the 2-minute tracks are heavy on repetition, and this one also sort of resembles an interlude too. So
yeah, I even was thinking that when I had listened to this. And I don't know. I feel like it's a little unfair. You're saying it's just like the artist had no idea what they were doing or anything like that. It's like do I gotta remind you? This is the first album in the vaporwave genre. Like he had nothing to go off of,
And I admitted that, and I am coming with that sort of hindsight bias.
I think you need to have that hindsight. Hindsight.
Well, I am. I definitely am, and I give it.
Someone's being
as
a little
I said,
too harsh.
I'm definitely not. Come on. I gave it the whole points for originality, and now when I take off that sort of what is frankly just external knowledge, right? The fact that it's an original thing. Beyond that, if I'm looking at this from a perspective of someone who, at least this is my approach right now while reviewing this album, is that if I were just given this album and maybe told the genre and no one told me that this is like the first one, I'd be like, hey, this is not great, and that's pretty much what I'm kind of going for. But I totally get, and I can see it. I can see it within the album, or I can hear it, that it has so many different elements of things that have become much more fully formed today. So I would totally give Chuck Pearson, or I forgot the whole name you gave.
One of Tricks Point Never.
One of Tricks Point Never.
Yeah.
The full marks for creating something that's, original in that sense, but beyond that, I don't know. It does not click for me at all. So I don't think I'm being that harsh on it, Mateo. Okay. I think I'm being honest, as honest as I can possibly.
Say some of this for the whole album review. We got one more track to go to. We got one more track. Okay, so B7, final track. Took a long time to get there. I mean, this
it sure did. It definitely felt like years.
It's not the longest song on the whole album, but it's definitely up there. It's it clocks in around like 4.5 minutes. It does have actually the most samples too. It has 3 samples. It's Woman in Chains by Tears for Fears. Next one is Letter from Spain by Electric Light Orchestra, and then it's Catch and Don't Look Back by Womack Womack. So those are the 3 samples. I thought it picked up the pace, especially from B6. I don't know. It was
okay, I guess.
I thought this was one of the better tracks. Definitely not the best. Top half though. I thought. To me, this slowed me into my mindscape of, it was like a vaporwave, watery abyss, and I thought it was a good, not great, but good way to end off kind of the album. Yeah.
Okay. More repetition. Very typical of Chuck Pearson, Trick Person. More like early vaporwave. It's pretty much a rehash of everything I've said earlier. I thought this one was actually okay at the time, I guess, but it didn't impress me in any way. And frankly, I don't know how qualified I am to review this track when I know when I was listening to this, I was counting down the seconds for this album to end. I wrote down, I am pretty sick of this album now, ... please end. And hey, let's get into if you don't mind, Mateo, let's get into our full album review, because I think I've spoken most of what I wanted to say.
Yeah, I'm sure you have. Was there anything else to wrap up your album review? I mean, save because you rated it, yeah? Save the rating for when I saved mine. No, you didn't rate it?
I did.
Okay, yeah, just save that for when. Okay, but you have anything else up for your entire album review to kind of wrap it up? And then I'll jump into mine.
I'll summarize a little bit, and I'll also bring up the parallel I mentioned a little bit earlier in the podcast. And the summarization is pretty much, look, if you listen to this podcast, you know my feelings towards this album. It's great for originality, novelty, experimentation. It's an early version of something that turned out to be a very cool, different genre. And I, as I said to Mateo just a couple minutes back, is that I give it complete points for doing that. But as an album, speaking from a musical form, I feel like when you're creating, even with this sort of genre, even when you're playing with this sort of genre, the whole album never feels fully formed to me. And as I said, maybe there would be some circumstance where if this was playing really in the background and I wasn't paying a lot of heed to it, it could work as okay background noise a little bit. But in general, no, it doesn't come together for me at all. It all feels very disjointed, even though it's supposed to feel like this long 55-minute track. Yeah, I mean, cool experimentation. It did not land with me at all. The one parallel I was going to make is something out of the art world, actually, is that if you've ever heard of something called Dadaism, Mateo, I don't know if you have, but
no, I've never heard of that.
It was sort of had it was back, I don't remember the exact era, but it was sort of like this very almost like a nihilist art form, and it kind of gave way to a lot of different other art forms. And even if you were to look at some of the artwork from then, today, it would take time to kind of really engage with the artwork. It's definitely very experimental and out there. And to me, this reminded me a lot of Dadaism, strangely enough. It reminded me a lot of, also partially because of the sampling, and I think, taking things from other places and trying to put them together. But if I want to listen to a great album with a lot of great samples, I would pick up something like Discovery or something from Daft Punk or something along those lines. And I know you're going to say that's an unfair comparison, and I understand why. I understand why, but it's at the same time it's not, because I'm just picking out certain elements and trying to put them together in that sense, where it's hey, here's two albums that are heavily dependent on samples. Let's compare them in that sense. And to me, this is like just not how you work with samples at all. It seems very, what's the word for it? I guess I would say, I'll just come back to not fully formed. You know, it feels, it's not even like a demo. It's just like someone playing around with things, which is cool. But yeah, no, it didn't work for me.
You know, that kind of leads me into just thinking, like, I'm wondering if you've ever, like, what necessarily you kind of expected with this album? Because the more you talk about this stuff, like, sure, Vaporwave does, I would say, sure, get better a little bit. It definitely changes, but like, if you're going just on the pure Vaporwave genre, not vapor trap, not lo-fi, not future funk or anything like that, like, this is what Vaporwave is. So especially on the repetitive and samples. So it's like, it doesn't change a bunch. So I'm actually, I'm honestly, I'm going to say, I don't think you've ever heard just Vaporwave before, other than maybe like,
you might be right.
I mean, let's track up Floral Shop or something, you know what I mean?
Sure, yeah. I think you might be definitely right in a couple ways. I mean, when we started the podcast too, and we try not to talk about the music a whole lot before recording the podcast. So, I mean, for me, maybe my expectation was something closer to lo-fi, I realize now.
Yeah, I think that's what it was. Yeah.
Perhaps. But at the same time, I know you mentioned like Simpsons Wave and things like that. Things that are sort of like almost like Vaporwave, treading into maybe lo-fi area. To me, it kind of coalesces a lot together. I know that's not how it's supposed to be, and I'm not super well versed with like the exact differences in all the genres. But you know, regardless of all that, you know, even putting away my expectations, when I'm listening to music, and I do like music, like I mentioned earlier, I do like music that has a soundscape quality to it, and it has a very like ethereal quality to it. This to me is just like, I recognize it as music. It's a work of music for sure. It's very far away from traditional works, but again, to me, it doesn't feel fully formed. It feels like someone playing around with a bunch of dials and notches and trying to see what sticks. And maybe it should have just stayed that way and then maybe kept on working toward it until it became something real. Or if this is really how, you know, modern vaporwave sounds like today, or maybe how vaporwave has kind of always been, then I guess like maybe I'm not super into this genre. I think I can I think
you hit it on the head there. I don't think overall vaporwave is not for everyone. I mean, it's the reason why it's not mainstream. Like,
and hey, look, I don't can listen to it, but you know, yeah.
I don't think it is your type of music, just kind of overall. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Maybe definitely the offshoots probably are, but like I think just pure vaporwave is not your thing.
Probably not. And the like random metaphor I was gonna make is like this is sort of like not exactly correct, but it's almost like if you had someone who only likes to drink like the super sugary drinks at Starbucks, not saying anything against that, those are great sometimes, but you know, if you were to say to someone that's coffee their entire life and then hand them a cup of black coffee and then say that's coffee, you're going to have a very sort of different reaction. And to me, I feel like for me, that sugary cup was maybe whatever version of vaporwave or lo-fi I had in my head. And then listening to this and being just maybe taken aback by it. You know, maybe I'll give this another listen someday, certain tracks, and maybe my opinion will change. But at the moment, I'm negative on this one. Go ahead with your album review.
Yeah, so my album review, I've said it before, I'll say it again. Dude, it's the founding vaporwave album. It gets points just for that. Like, it doesn't matter if you guys don't think it's fair or not, but like for me, I love the genre as a whole and all its offshoots and just pure vaporwave. Like, it gets points for it, you know. Like, I will say, I didn't like it as much as I necessarily thought. I still rated it high, but you know, for what it is, to me, it's still amazing. It's not the best. Still amazing just for what it is. Like, there's still a bunch of stellar tracks on this, especially like, A1 to A3, B4, obviously my favorite. Just like, those are just, I can listen to those kind of any time. I will say there are some slogs, definitely towards like the middle around then, just kind of I'm like, okay, you're definitely experimenting around here. It's not for everyone. Like, but I think that leads into the album as a whole. Like, vaporwave and this album just like isn't for everyone. You know, the only reason I'd even say like to maybe listen to this is to get a vaporwave kind of history lesson. Because I would even say like definitely check out a couple of these tracks. But unlike some of the other albums we had reviewed, I don't think you need to listen to Eccojams all the way through, and unless you kind of want that early founding vaporwave lesson and just kind of see where it's kind of grown from. But other than that, I'd say definitely check out the hits of this, you know. And before I say, because I'm kind of winding down, before I say what I rated out of 10, I do want to say, Rishabh, I am glad you listened to this. I think you came in with an open mind, you know.
I did. I tried.
I'm not, and I want to say this too, for as the episodes as they come, like, I'm not always going to pick a 10 out of 10, and I'm not going to always try to, too. Because obviously I had listened to, like, we both listened to, like, Discovery 4, and I had always will love that. But also, like, I had never listened to this album all the way through, too, so not just to get your and the audience's kind of thoughts on the album, too, I kind of liked it to get and correlate all my thoughts on this album as well. And I think definitely. I'm definitely glad I had picked this, just because I know at the end of the day, we're more future episodes, too. I do want to introduce some other, maybe not weirder, but other kind of offshoots and maybe more normalized too. And I think it was just important too to have this. I picked this Eccojams album before I go into different and other types of not just vaporwave, but just other types of not as mainstream music. It just kind of butters up and, you know, primes people's ears. I would say, but that kind of leaves me with what I rated out of 10. To me, especially after hearing you talk, you make me kind of want to dock it down 1 point. You're definitely not gonna. I don't think you're definitely not gonna agree with where I put it, but I'm not gonna dock it down again just because what this album is and what it kind of means and how it was the future and beginning of vaporwave. To me, I put this album as a 8 out of 10.
Okay. Yeah. Don't agree with that, as you all know by now.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go with 3 out of 10. I was kind of going between 2 to 4 in that range. I think 2 is way too low. I think 4 is maybe a little too high. 3 out of 10. Hey, look, you know, it's definitely like Mateo said. If you're interested in learning what vaporwave is, hey, this was a learning experience for me because I feel like I have perhaps a stronger understanding of what vaporwave is going to mean for me in the future. Something to avoid, maybe. I don't know. I'll have to listen. I feel like this has primed me to listen to some of the newer stuff just to see how it compares. Yeah. But yeah, definitely a 3 out of 10 for me. Cool, different, but again, doesn't land with me. But that's my thing on Eccojams.
All right. Yeah. Again, I'm thanks for listening to it and giving an honest review. I'll give you that. Though we definitely don't agree.
We don't. We're the Aux Fiends.
Aux Fiends. I mean, that's why they call us Aux Fiends, you know. I think that wraps up everything you have to say and I have to say about the tracks and album as a whole. That kind of leads us into our next part of the podcast, where it's just kind of the housekeeping. I don't think we really have anything to say other than your pick, your choice for next episode, Rishabh, right?
That would be it, I think. My next pick is definitely different from Melodrama. Okay. I was kind of going between a couple different albums. I was thinking of potentially doing something more close to Melodrama at first. Well, actually, perhaps even more pop-like at first. But then I had a different album in mind as well, which is the one I'm going to go with. This is an artist that I've listened to sort of in different ways, in different forms, sort of never really sat down and fully listened to an album from this artist particularly all the way down. So I've listened to certain tracks. I've listened to the lead singer's album before, and I really like that. I definitely want to have that be part of the podcast at some point, just not yet, because I'm actually curious to see what I think of this musical group, including that lead singer, just as a musical sense, together as a full-on album. And I actually started listening to a little bit of their other tracks at a low volume, sort of in the background. Some of it I listened to this album too. I listened to some of the preliminary tracks. But I think I'm ready to kind of just sit down and listen all the way down. So this one's called A Moon-Shaped Pool, and it's by Radiohead. So for me, this one comes down to sort of being interested in some of Tom York's work, partly because he's had a pretty big influence on film in some ways. He did the score, I think, for Suspiria, the new Suspiria reboot or remake, and then he did also sort of a very cool concept album called Anima, which also had a short film directed by Paul Thomas Anderson. So a bunch of different things kind of going for it. Plus, I listened to one of the tracks from Radiohead in a different film. So it kind of, that plus having enjoyed Anima, plus having listened to a little bit of Radiohead, all kind of came together and made me want to decide to have this be our next album to discuss. Mateo, I'm eager for you to listen to this one. I personally think we're going to reach more solid middle ground on this one. I think some of the sound is, it's almost like an album that I think is going to have us meet halfway in some ways. I think there's going to be things you won't like. I think there's going to be things I like, some things you like, and so on. But A Moon-Shaped Pool by Radiohead, that's the one.
All right.
And so be sure to listen to that one before checking out our next episode.
Cool. Yeah, I'm excited for it. All right, I think that
that does about it.
Yeah, about it, Thank you, Aux Fienders. Nope, that's not what you guys are called.
I don't know. It was too soon.
Too soon. Thanks for listening to this experimental episode, experimental podcast, experimental album, as Rishabh would say.
I would.
Catch you guys on the next episode.
Yeah, thanks for listening, everyone.